Hi there! Welcome to part 3 of my series, Art Geek Timeline. Part 3. Did you guys ever watch Mulan as a kid? That was one of my favorite movies. I've kind of noticed that there are a lot of very popular myths from different cultures about warrior women. Obviously Mulan is an example. We also have Atalanta of the Greeks. But the warrior woman I would like to talk about today comes from the Mongols. Now, who are the Mongols? Well, have you ever heard of Genghis Khan? I'm willing to bet you have. The Mongols were a semi-nomadic empire. They were incredibly powerful and managed to take over most of Asia and parts of Europe. They were incredibly skilled warriors and could even shoot bow and arrow from a moving horse, which to me is incredibly impressive. The woman warrior I would like to talk about is called Qutulun. She lived from 1260 to 1306 CE. She was actually the great-great-granddaughter of Genghis Khan. Now I know that makes her sound like a bit of a nepo baby, but Qutulun was badass. She was her father's most trusted military general and was also a very skilled wrestler. In fact, according to an account from Marco Polo, she vowed she would never marry a man unless he could beat her in a wrestling match. And she also vowed that if he lost, he would have to give her 100 horses. Horses were pretty valuable in Mongol culture. So the story goes that many different men tried to beat her, but unfortunately her skill outmatched theirs. Now she ended up with an army of 10,000 horses. Now unfortunately, Qutulun eventually did end up being overthrown by a jealous brother. Brothers can be so annoying. But her story is still fascinating. So of course, given that this is Art Geek Timeline, I have to show you some art. So I'm going to show you a rendition of a scene from the legend in which Qutulun is battling a suitor. It was painted by Maître de la Mazarine, obviously a French man, around the early 1400s. This is a painting that can be found in one of Marco Polo's travel books. I bet it's going to be really accurate. So yeah, here we just have a super authentic Wait, what? Hold up. These people are supposed to be Mongolian? That's not Qutulun, that's Catherine. So yeah, as you can see, this whole thing is very much a Europeanized, dare I say, whitewashed version of the story. So aside from the fact that these are all obviously white people, there's also a lot of Western European elements here, especially the clothing. I mean, they have the wrestling pose and then the throng of horses, but those are basically the only two accurate elements represented here. I'd also like to take a moment to point out the architecture, which is a stone courtyard with pillars. This architecture is not remotely Mongolian. As I said, they are a semi-nomadic society, meaning that they're going to be using semi-permanent dwellings such as yurts that can be put onto carts and then carried. But yeah, in general, this is just incredibly whitewashed. I mean, these two look like they're fighting over a cornbread recipe. If the people in your painting are paler than me and they're supposed to be Mongolian, you know you have a problem. So you guys may be wondering, how could this possibly be global? It's whitewashed. If anything, it's almost preventing the spread of Mongolian visual culture to Europe. Now, I do agree with this element, but we can still think of this image as global, as unfortunate as the whitewashing part is. What we have here is an idea, a narrative, being taken and adapted into a European visual context. So while the Europeans might look at that image and think Qutulun was a ginger, they're still going to be learning about this Mongolian story, and therefore might learn a few things about the Mongolians themselves. So just to reiterate, we have a Mongolian narrative traveling from Mongolia to Europe, then the image of such narrative is being adapted into a European context. So this does still count as global. That has been the story of Qutulun. I hope you enjoyed it. Tune in next time for part 4, where we're going to talk about Islamic architecture.